Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm your host this week, Brandon Murphy, class of 2017 from the Office of Alumni Engagement. And this week I'm joined by Chris Grillo, class of 1999, Vice President of Sales, National Accounts at Tubi. A reminder to everyone listening to the Saints and Alumni Show that there are a few ways to listen to the bi-weekly podcast highlighting members of the Siena community. You can listen right here on 88.3 The Saint and iHeartRadio. And then at 5 p.m., you can subscribe to Apple, Spotify, and YouTube to watch and listen to the complete selection of shows. Chris, we're so excited to have you on the show today. We were excited to have you back for Alumni Weekend just a couple of months ago and to keep you engaged with the college. I know that we have a lot of great topics to talk about today, from on campus as a student to now your career outside of Siena. But first, officially, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're excited that this podcast is airing kind of right in the beginning of basketball season. Men's and women's basketball is looking to be really strong this year. A lot of energy and excitement around both of those programs. And I know we could probably do 3 segments or an entire show just on Siena basketball, your time, my time watching the team. But our listeners kind of want to hear everything about you and your time in sales and your time at Siena as well. But it's always tradition when we have a new guest on the show that hasn't been on, is our listeners kind of get a little bit of a perspective on why you wanted to be a Siena Saint. So Chris, I want to begin today's show with taking the clocks back kind of to those mid-90s and talk a little bit about, what you were looking for in a college and ultimately why you wanted to be a Siena Saint.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do a full segment on Siena basketball. So anytime you want to have me back, sign me up. Yeah, totally. So, why I became a Siena Saint. So I grew up on Long Island, New York, in the 80s and 90s. And I went to a Catholic, high school, Catholic education from when I was in elementary school all the way through college, obviously. And one of the big drivers for me as I graduated high school was attending a college or university that was, very similar to what I was used to. Siena was a big feeder school, I think they called them, of students to Siena from St. Anthony's, where I went to high school in Huntington. And a lot of my friends were going to schools similar in the Northeast region, Catholic universities, liberal arts, small schools, kind of that feel, that I would say kind of family vibe, know a lot of people that went there or were going to go there. So I was doing my college tours and did the usual suspects around the Northeast, the Loyolas and the Marist and the Fairfields and whatnot. But Siena, I kind of fell in love with when I went there to visit. And, pretty, I think I committed early acceptance, I want to say. I think, pretty quickly after I, got home, I said to my parents, I think I want to go there. So, signed the paperwork and committed. And, 4 years later, I was a graduate. So it wasn't a hard decision for me at all.
I would love to do a live podcast during basketball season down in Atlantic City, MAC Championship Saturday. That'd be a great one to do with you back on the show. And, we kind of get into Siena. For me, I was lucky. I had an older brother that went to Siena at the time. He was a senior when I was a freshman. So, I got to go up to the townhouses on the weekends as a freshman. I kind of had the ins and outs of the dining hall and the wrap shop and all the food. And, I was able to get off campus with them. I didn't have a car at the time. It was a freshman policy. But that was, 2013. So I'm kind of wondering now, in the mid 90s, for those that didn't attend Siena, can you kind of give us a little bit of a layout of, what campus looked like in the 90s? And did you live on campus with the roommate? Did you guys live off campus? What was that structure like back then?
That was a big part of it. I think, when I was at Siena, I think we had maybe in total 2,800 students, I want to say, so really small. My high school had about 2,000 students. So a lot of times my friends would say, your high school was almost as big as your college. It's so weird. But for me, it was a kind of a normal thing, a little bit bigger, didn't know everybody on campus a lot. I was a Hennepin, was the dorm I had when I was a freshman. So met my roommates then and my buddies in my wing, and we basically stayed together all 4 years. We didn't have cell phones back then, shockingly, right? So I didn't get my first cell phone until I graduated. So we had to call each other on our landlines. And if you were going to meet, to go out to lunch, dinner, out for the night, you had to be at, the circle, we called it, I think, at that time. And if you missed it, then, you'd either take your chances and meet us there, or you didn't go out that night. So definitely similar in the sense where if I go back to Siena now, the footprint's the same, right? Looks basically the same. The townhouses, the new townhouses, where the dorms are. A lot of things have changed since we graduated my year. A couple of new dorms, the new science building, I think, right? A lot of things have upgraded, I think, since we graduated. But we loved it. I mean, we had a great time. I would, play pickup basketball at the Arc. And we were always down there. We had the two cafeterias. We had the Rat, and I think the sub shop came after I think my junior year, so we got to have the wraps and stuff like that. But really small, kind of knit community. I would always say you almost had to make it a point to not find somebody, right? You were always around together. We we all lived on campus, so my friends and I, we did dorms until junior year. Then we had a suite. And then we were in Townhouse 32 our senior year. And my younger brother, like you had mentioned, your brother was a freshman when I was a senior. So, he followed me to Siena and had a great time there as well. And he graduated in 2002. So I had, my brother there my last year, which was a lot of fun and just a great time overall. But I'd say Siena, for me, even when I went up to my reunion, hasn't really changed all that much. Technology's advanced and things like that, but the school and the feel of that tight knit kind of family feeling is still there. So not much from the 25 years since I graduated, which I can't believe I could even say that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just approaching on 10 years from moving into Siena. So I know that 25 number is big in a lot of minds of alumni. And when I went to Siena, I had 77 kids in my high school. And I get to the dining hall, and there's literally more kids in the dining hall than in my entire town. Like, that was a crazy adjustment that I had to make. And then, we kind of pivot the conversation now to some inside the classroom experiences and outside of the classroom experiences. And, we are just celebrating 50 years of social work at Siena this year. And I believe that you came in as a social work major and transitioned into the School of Business. Can you talk a little bit about that academic journey that you had and why you wanted to pivot to the School of Business?
Yeah, I actually started as a sociology major.
Yeah.
So, similar, but and I was, I think when I first started out, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Sociology was interesting to me because it's the study of groups and behavior. And I thought that was like, hey, that's a pretty cool, interesting, major to kind of maybe go down that path. I realized, I think after midway through my sophomore year, when you have to declare, I think really declare, I believe that was the time. I think I might have asked a few professors, like, what can I do with this degree? And, and they were like, well, sociologist, you can be a social worker. And not that those careers didn't intrigue me. I don't know if my vision of what I was going to do in my future kind of entailed working in that field. So I pivoted like a lot of people do when they're in college, and I decided to be a business major. I was a marketing management major. Jumped into that. I didn't, love math and econ and those things, but the business part of it interests me the most, right? Learning about business. My father was in business. So I had that kind of, upbringing of knowing what that was like to kind of work in a professional field like that. And I did it and graduated. I almost had a sociology minor. I think I missed it by a few credits, but realized that what I wanted to do from a career wise just kind of changed course as time went on. So made the right decision. As we go on in the conversation, we can talk about what I do now and how my career has kind of grown since I graduated.
And we've got just about 6 minutes left in the first segment of today. And I want to talk a little bit about the on-campus involvement that you had as well. And what I want to do is kind of, put in a bucket these next two questions. And even though you moved over to the management side of things, you really did enjoy some of the theology classes that you took at Siena. You had a really good connection with some of the friars that taught those classes. And it ended up you being a liaison with the Franciscans here on campus with the Board of Trustees.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about why you enjoyed those theology classes and also, working with that subcommittee with the trustees at Siena College?
Yeah, I think even in high school, I was always, the participation grade you get, as the 5 or 10%, I always got, top marks there. I don't know. I was intrigued by, certain discussions in class and theology, history. Were two classes that I remember always asking questions, raise my hand, having thoughts. Theology was interesting because I did feel at the time that there were really interesting conversations we were having in class. And the professors there, whether it be a friar or a layman, would always have great dialogue with us. And I did find that I think I probably talked too much because I got approached. I believe I was maybe in the cafeteria one day from one of the brothers. And I'm blanking on who it was so many years ago, but they asked me if I'd be interested in representing the student body in the Franciscan Tradition Committee is what it was called. And I was like, sure. I had already been doing, I think I was the treasurer or the secretary of my class senior year. So I was already involved in a few extracurricular things, and it's always good. I always give advice for students just to have that on your resume and just for your own, well-being, and, gets you more well-rounded. But at that point, the representative, I was the student liaison, like I said, and I would basically, I think, meet with the board of trustees. It was either once or twice a year. And they would talk about different things that were going on campus and how it would affect the student body. And then they kind of, would look to me to give my perspective from a student. And if I thought those things were, additive or if they were beneficial. So it was really cool. I kind of felt like I was the kid at this, the parents' table. It was a long boardroom. I remember a big long table in a boardroom, and I was sitting at the end, and they would all look at me, and they were great. They wanted to hear my opinion, and I think they took it to heart. So it was just a way to connect with not only the board of trustees, but also the leadership of the school, and some of the the people that I would see, like the president. I think Father Mackin at the time was there. So it was a really cool experience, and I'm looking back on it, I probably didn't appreciate it as much then as I do now when I got to do things like that. So it was cool.
One of those experiences are really great to have to make those connections. I know that my twin Andy, he was the Senate president, so he would have to meet every 2 months or so with the trustees to kind of give a presentation on the student body, and the trustees are going to meet in a couple of weeks. So maybe Chris, you'll come back and maybe see some old friends. I'm gonna hold on to the internship question maybe until segment 2, as we kind of begin to talk about your professional path and conclude the first segment today, highlighting just your overall experience. And I know that Siena basketball plays a big role in that experience, and even to the point where when there was no cell phones, you were reading box scores in a newspaper. Chris, can you talk a little bit about your passion for Siena men's basketball, and all these years later, when you get that group chat together or you have that mini reunion, what are some of the things that your friend group looks back on?
Yeah, I mean, I was so fortunate to go to a really small college with at the time, and we've had our ups and downs throughout the years, like every school, but really at that time, a big basketball program in the Northeast. And we got some national recognition. I think I joke around. I'm made fun of by a lot of people with my friends. They think I'm like like a Cameron crazy, like a Duke fan. Like I'm always in the know, and I'm on the blog posts. I'm reading Times Union. I'm looking at the Gazette. And I think that even when I was a freshman, I always loved college basketball. As a kid growing up in New York, I would go to St. John's games a lot. So the college basketball experience to me was so much fun, and getting to go to a school where we were D1 and we had, we played, in the Times Union, the Pepsi. Actually, when I was there, it was Knickerbocker Arena.
Yeah,
it was the Pepsi Arena, and then it was now MVP, right? So we had a few different iterations, but always that seeing a game there was always amazing to me, especially when we would, quote unquote, sell it out with the fans around Albany. But I watched games at the MAC when it was still the Arc, sorry, right? The Arc back then.
It was the Arc back then, yep.
Right, when it was still just these small, it was like a gigantic high school gym. And I did read the box scores in the library every day after a game, and I would go there. I should have been studying probably, but I was reading box scores. But I will say this, it did kind of bring the campus together. A lot of friends I made were, we all would go to the games together. We talk about, the night and how it went and why we won or why we lost. And also, not to mention having, the athletes and these basketball players live on campus with us. And we were good friends with a few of them. And in other schools where there's 50,000 kids, they're like celebrities, you barely even see them. So it was really cool. And I do remember Paul Hewitt, who was the coach at the time, my senior year, walking on campus. You could wave to him and say, hey, coach, we give you a wave. It was really fun, really cool. And I think that was one of the things that kind of even in years after, when I met somebody and they went to Siena or they were a hoops fan, I would say, oh, I know Siena, of course. Yeah, Siena. And they would talk about it. So it gave you a little bit of a street cred, I would say.
Yeah, a little bit of pride to it.
Right. So yeah, I had, I was going through a box of old, clippings I had just, over the years. And I found like the ESPN, the Sports Illustrated magazine, back then, magazines, right? And it had, an article about Siena in there, how good we did. So just things that makes you feel connected to the school. And I don't know, it was just a cool feeling. I always enjoyed it and I still do. So it was great. Really added to my college experience.
Yeah, the great thing that Siena does nowadays is, they have 21 club for the seniors.
Yep.
So they always try to do it around 3 Friday men's basketball games, the
Yep.
dog pound, the buses. There's going to be an exhibition game on campus this year for the men's team. So it's really exciting to see what is going on around campus. But when we come back in the second segment of today's show, we're going to talk about all things off campus, life after Siena, and then talk a little bit about the streaming services in Tubi and the future of that. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. Welcome back to the Saints and Alumni Show right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint. I'm your host this week, Brandon Murphy, class of 2017 from the Office of Alumni Engagement. And this week, I'm joined by Chris Grillo, class of 1999, Vice President of Sales, National Accounts at Tubi. I'm really, really excited to get into the conversation of streaming and what Tubi is and what the outlook for Tubi and streaming looks like in the next, 5 or so years. But kind of before we get to current day positions and jobs, we got to, take the clock back like we did in the first segment and talk about that first year after Siena, that first job, and kind of, leaving Siena and understanding that next chapter in your life. Chris, can you take us back to that turn of the century? You got your first job. Did you move down to the city like majority of the alumni do? Did you stay up here? Kind of, what was that next step for you after graduation?
Yeah. I thought about moving back to, downstate, as we call it, right? But I did stick around for a year. Few of my buddies were from upstate New York, central New York, and they were all going to live in Albany. So I think there was 3 or 4 of us who decided to stay. My younger brother was still there as a sophomore. So I felt like, was I ready yet? My parents and I talked about like, why don't you stay up in Albany for a year? I did get a job working at a bank, entry-level job, sales rep, kind of opening accounts and things like that. And it was fine. It was kind of an extension of college, but not really. Not like I thought it would be, maybe. So I realized after, I'd say about, 8 or 9 months, I just, had a desire to move back home and get my life started down in New York City. So I called up a buddy of mine, my old roommate from Siena, who was living in Boston. And I said, hey, you want to live in New York City? He said, yeah. And not even a few months later, we were both living on the Upper East Side of New York City, and started our lives in New York. So good experience up in Albany. But as time went on, I realized going down and starting my career was going to be downstate.
I had a really interesting kind of transition for me after college. I had moved to Thailand to teach English. All of my buddies were up here either in the Siena MBA program or living in Albany. Yep. And I didn't eventually move back to Albany until 2019, and at that point the pandemic had hit. And I thought like, oh, I'm going to go out with all my friends, see all my friends again, and still weren't able to. And then it wasn't until later I was able to kind of move back in with some buddies and kind of get that Siena feel back into the adulting life. And for you, when you were down in the city, living with your Siena friends and kind of getting your feet wet into the industry, one of the first, kind of positions we want to highlight and company is, you worked for Comedy Central and MTV as one of your first stops along the way. Can you talk a little bit about how you found that position and what your role was within that company?
Yeah, I think to kind of start off, I think I always thought of myself working for a big name organization when I knew I wanted to be in business, right? So it doesn't mean everything, but it definitely helps to start out. So I worked at a couple of smaller media companies. One was an outdoor media company that sold billboards. I worked for the Weather Channel for a little while. I worked for the Discovery Channel. So these cool, the Weather Channel, Discovery Channel. Are you working on TV shows? And I was not. I was in the advertising sales department at all of these companies. And really, what I explained to people of what that means is we were in charge of getting advertisers to spend on either those networks or on those platforms. And really, that's where the ad dollars come from. So when you watch commercials and people get annoyed by commercials and they're watching television or movies, I used to say, that's what I do. I get the advertisers to spend with us so what products are out there, right? Without commercials and advertising, you wouldn't know what the newest flavor drink is. You wouldn't know what the newest car is, right? It's people think of advertising as sometimes oh, it's just, commercials, but actually it really does help in your day-to-day life, at least how I look at it, right? So that's kind of what I was doing, and working my way up through the ranks, starting out as entry-level jobs into more junior jobs and more senior jobs. And when I got to Comedy Central, at the time it was in the, I think 2007 or 8, I want to say. I was just then getting into trying to be a salesperson, right? Where I was out talking to those clients and talking to their agencies about spending with Comedy Central, doing product integrations into shows, whether it be the Daily Show at the time or shows like Workaholics and fun shows like that. So that kind of took me through years of working in television. And then what I did was I pivoted to social media, which was a company called Snapchat, which I think a lot of people who are on this call are familiar with, or especially if you're a certain demographic. And I really was thrown into the world of social media, which now we all know really well, right, with the TikToks and Instagram. But at the time, Snapchat was just kind of up and coming. And we were getting to every brand you can imagine, telling them about what Snapchat was and how it could reach their consumers. And I really got to travel a ton and learn a lot about the business and myself as a salesperson, and really enjoyed it. And then from there, I moved on to Yahoo. I worked at Yahoo Sports, where I got to work, which I loved, with brands who were interested in sports and reaching sports fans. Right, that was really enjoyable. I did that for 3 years, and then from there went to iHeartMedia, which was podcasting and streaming radio, which again is another medium that I think people are using a lot more now than they never have before. So advertisers and brands wanted to get in touch with those folks who were listening to radio and podcasting as much as they were. And then now I'm currently at Tubi, which is a free ad-supported streaming service, right? So most people, if you're on your TV at home or wherever you watch your whatever you're viewing, you are looking at the Rokus, the Hulus, the Netflix, the Amazon Primes, all these other services that are basically providing content to consumers. And the thing about Tubi is that we do all that. We have tons of content, over 250,000 shows and movies, but we also are a free ad-supported site. So there is no cost to join. You don't have to worry about the price of your subscription going up 1 month and sharing your subscription with other people. It's really just you download and you can enjoy it and start watching it wherever you are, on your mobile, your tablet, or on your TV. And it's been great. I've been there for about almost 5 months. So I'm kind of back in TV in a way, but I'm not back at cable television. I'm in streaming television, but it all came full circle for me. So I kind of touched on every medium and advertising more or less. And the latest one now is one that seems to be the most popular currently, which is streaming. So it's been a lot of fun.
And I'm really excited. You mentioned in your first answer, the Daily Show. Jon Stewart's actually going to be coming up to Albany, I think at the Palace Theater, to do like a mini event. So Albany is always great to kind of have that celebrity type feel. We talked about it in between segments today of what Albany can actually offer. And I do want to just kind of dive a little bit deeper into your role specifically at Tubi, and what we think Tubi could become in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
As your vice president of national accounts, kind of what does your day-to-day look like? And you had sent me an article from the New York Times of the little streamer that could, but there's quite a positive projection for the company for the future. Can you talk about first roles and responsibilities, and then what we could expect maybe in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So currently my role in my day-to-day is reaching out to, clients that I've worked with in the past, some clients I haven't. So these are, major top 100, 200 clients that you all heard of, right? The PepsiCos of the world and the Nestle's and the Mars, things like that. And really reaching out to them, just educating them on what Tubi is, right? And basically saying, there's a lot of great places to spend ad dollars, and there's a lot of great places that you can reach your consumers, but why is Tubi unique and why are we special? Why should you look at us differently than you look at others, right? And I always say, in other places I've worked, it doesn't mean you have to spend with one advertising platform. You can spend with, several. Right? So we don't want as a salesperson, you don't want to go in and say, hey, you should only work with me, because that's really probably not the best way to do it. You want to, spread your message out as far and wide as you can. And Tubi is unique because it is a much larger platform than people, I think, know. We have 81 million monthly active users, so that's large. That's a large swath of the viewing public in the U.S. We're bigger than a lot of other platforms that people probably don't know that we are. And I think the reason why we are doing as well as we are is because we are so large, right? And so many people do use our service. Secondly, we have a really young multicultural audience that we can hit. I think young audiences don't want to pay for things. I mean, let's just be honest, right? If you have a service that's free and a service that you have to pay for, and you're maybe in your 20s or starting out in work, I don't know, I'd probably go with the free one, see how it is, right? So we do find that is something that's differentiated for us. And the content we have, we're owned by Fox. So Fox has a lot of content that they put on their own channels, and also that they have in their library. So we can tap into that, and a lot of partnerships with different entertainment companies that we have over 250,000, like I said, titles that we can share with our consumers, so, and our users. So I think that there just shows you the growth that we're seeing, and the reasons why is again, the more people that get to know it. We had a Super Bowl commercial last year, which gets you get Super Bowl, you get the word out, right? That's a big way to do it. So I think you'll start seeing a lot more of that in advertising and marketing from our side, just to kind of get the word out. And hopefully that means people try it out, they like it, and we continue to grow. So that's kind of where we're at. So it's a fun time right now. We are moving in an upward direction, which we like, and things are going great. So
I've been out of college for 10 years and I'm still looking for free options. So it's always great to
come on over
in the marketplace. And honestly, I did not know much about Tubi as well until I met with you and had a great pre-interview. And hopefully this episode can kind of shine some light on it as well for our alumni listeners. And we do have a ton of alumni listeners that listen on the radio, which obviously is still a huge marketplace for podcasts as well. And we also have tons of listeners on Spotify and YouTube. And that alumni community is very strong. And I want to kind of conclude today's show by highlighting that strong alumni network and the growth of the college, and some final words that you have as a passionate alum who stays heavily involved, not just with athletics, but with admissions events and with contributing back here to the community. What would be some of your final thoughts for listeners that want to hear some things about Siena College?
Yeah, I mean, I will say, hands down, it was the best decision I could have made when I was, leaving high school and figuring out where I wanted to go spend 4 years in college. Really, most of my friends I have now, the vast majority of them were my buddies from college, right? And we've kept in touch. We all live within a few hours of each other in the Northeast. A couple of guys moved out west, but we still are on that text chain every day. We're talking about either Siena or memories of Siena, or the Mets and Yankees right now, which we're all trying to hope for both in the playoffs. So just a really great connection I made. It was a small school that fit for me. And I think the relationships that I made there have really helped me, kind of helped me just, figure out who I was as a person. And, as I advanced, not only in my career, my personal life, I always kind of feel like Siena was a big part of who I am, and I guess who I became, right? So it's funny, even wearing like my Siena pullover, see somebody who went there, I'm always like, hey, Siena, it's really cool to see a sticker on a car. Yep. Or somebody wearing a hat, and I don't care where I am. I was in Italy years ago, in Siena, Italy, and I met somebody who was like, I went to Siena, and it was a really cool kind of thing where you're like in a little club, a little private club, and it's fun to have those memories and to connect with people on that level. So I would say keep in touch, with the school. I've been doing a lot of that lately and reaching back out to you guys and vice versa. I think it's fun to see, what's going on there. And 25 years later, I still felt I was, 20 something when I went back to visit. So it's just a great school, a great education, great people there. And I don't know, I just loved it. And if I could share that message with anyone who's out there who may be thinking about going to college, I'd say, Siena could be a great choice for you. It was for me.
I love that you mentioned Italy, kind of as a reference point for how big Siena and how small Siena really is. I'll leave with this one last story too to add on to that. President Seifert was in Italy with his wife Deb over the springtime with some of the trustees, and he was getting a bottle of wine for dinner, and there was 3 Siena students studying abroad in Siena, Italy, also getting a bottle of wine for dinner,
Wow.
and they were in the same checkout line together. So you never know where in the world you're going to find Siena alumni, but we always love to have them back home here as well. Chris,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining the show today. I know we could, have you back to talk about basketball, but we might need to have you back in a year to talk about Tubi and the streaming industry. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time right here on the Saints and Alumni Show.